Hello everyone! Today we are going to discuss my favorite books so far of 2021. The first category is kind of speculative fiction or science fiction or fantasy, and the first book that I read, I actually can't believe that was this year, but I finished it on January 2nd, so it was this year, and that is The Burning God by R.F. Kuang. This was the final book in the Poppy War trilogy. If you've seen my video on female authors in science fiction and fantasy, you'll know that I'm a big fan of that trilogy. I know that it did get a lot of hype and a lot of people didn't feel like it lived up to the hype, and I totally get that, but I did really enjoy it. I thought it was a very solid trilogy, and I was not disappointed at all by the ending, which is pretty rare, I think, for me. The second speculative fiction book that I favorited this year is Dead Astronauts by Jeff Vandermeer. This is kind of a companion novel to Born, which was one of my favorite books of last year. Jeff Vandermeer is one of my absolute favorite authors. I am working my way through his entire collection, and I absolutely love the Born series. I think that I could write like a dissertation on how many things this trilogy covers. Like, it's not really a trilogy. There's 2 books and a like short story slash novella, which, spoiler alert, is the next one, so I'll just talk about them together. Dead Astronauts and The Strange Bird, which are kind of companion books or in the series of the Born universe. So if you're not familiar, Born is the story of kind of scavengers in a post-apocalyptic world, and then Dead Astronauts is kind of a prequel at the same time as after. Like, this book is a wild journey. I was really afraid I wasn't gonna like it, partially because I have seen a lot of people who really didn't like it, but I actually loved it. The first 100 pages or so were really tough. I had no idea what was going on. I had no idea what was going on for a lot of the book. This is a very abstractly written book. To call it a novel is maybe setting people up to not like it, just because there's not really a plot in the traditional sense. You jump around in time, you jump around in characters. It's very non-linear, but it covers so much. Like, there's so many important themes in it that it explores really effectively, I feel like, through a lot of the characters. I've heard a lot of people talk about how, like, it's just nonsense, you know, like Jeff Vandermeer heard that people like weird stuff, and so he just tried to write as weird of a book as he possibly could. But I do think those people maybe didn't finish it, or they had written it off at some point earlier in the book, so they just weren't willing to pick up on the things. Like, if you don't like weird books, or you don't like this weird of books, that's totally fine. But to say that it is just nonsense, to me, I don't understand how you could think that, because he talks about so many important topics in this book. There's, you know, the topic of globalization, and like e-waste is a huge theme in Born, and that's kind of also covered here. About cruelty, like about cruelty to people, cruelty to animals, testing on people, testing on animals. There's so much here. It's such a rich book in so many ways that it's a disservice to say that it is pure nonsense. However, I also understand not wanting to wade through all of the like trippiness to get to the point. I totally understand that. So this is not a book for everyone, but if it's something that appeals to you, if you don't mind extremely non-linear storytelling, if you don't mind just kind of getting impressions of things rather than an actual plot, if you don't mind things not making sense, then I highly recommend Dead Astronauts. The Strange Bird is much easier actually to read. It's a very linear story. It's incredibly bittersweet. It's beautiful. Highly recommend that to just about anybody. series is like my heart. I cannot wait to reread them all. Next section is just fiction, and for that I have The Women of Brewster Place by Gloria Naylor. I read this one myself, and then actually we will be discussing this in the class that I'm taking. This book it's called A Novel in 7 Stories, and it really is kind of interconnected short stories, and I thought that this told a very cohesive story through them. If you like character-driven works, I think you will love this. It's incredibly character-driven. It is very sad. Very, very sad book. There's a lot of hope in it, but at the same time very heavy, lots of trigger warnings for lots of different things, so look those up if you are concerned. But highly recommend checking out this book, and I plan to read all of Gloria Naylor's work as well. I cannot believe that this was a first novel. So accomplished, such a great writer. So the next category would be nonfiction. My favorite book that I've read thus far that is nonfiction this year is Decolonizing Methodologies. This is an amazing book. It is kind of a scholarly, critical book about how research has been weaponized against indigenous populations throughout the world. The author is from Australia, I believe, and so she discusses how this has been done in Australia, in New Zealand, in the US, in Canada. It's kind of about how research and academia and lots of the institutions that are part of Western society especially have been used both to steal from indigenous populations and also to subjugate them further, to discredit them. And some of the things that they discussed I was familiar with, some of them I was not, but even the things I was familiar with, it's just a really, really concise and extremely accessible explanation that really makes you think about your own perspective on the world and where did you get that perspective. Something that she mentions is just the perspective of space and natural space and human interaction with that space. The Western obsession with the water is here and we don't want it here. Where do we move the water for it to be where it will be useful for us? Whereas that's not the indigenous perspective. And just even things as simple as that, like that's kind of part of my work. So even just thinking about that from a career perspective of, oh yeah, we have completely constructed this world around our own perspectives, and because they are assumed to be the standard, the truth, we just never even consider another way of looking at it. So I think that that's really important to consider in your own work and in your own studies of what am I taking for granted as the truth that may not be an objective truth. So highly recommend this book. There's a 3rd edition coming out I think this year, and I pre-ordered that one because, you know, I need my own copy to take notes from and tab to high heaven, etc. So before I go on to my honorable mentions, I thought I would also just mention my favorite books that I've read in Spanish and German so far this year. So my favorite book that I've read in Spanish this year was La Magia del Orden, which is The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, the graphic novel translated into Spanish. And if you've watched my Spanish books that I've read so far video, I talk about how much I just adore Marie Kondo. I loved this book as expected, and yeah, this is just such a like meditative thing for me. It's such a centering thing, reminding me to prioritize the life that I want, not the life that society tells me that I want. And yeah, Marie Kondo was kind of the beginning of my journey into realizing that several years ago. And so anytime I can, you know, refresh that perspective, I love it, and it was just really nice to read. My favorite book that I've read in German this year was Fangs by Sarah Anderson. This was precious, like so cute and endearing and hilarious. It's not really a novel, it's more vignettes and like little stories and little flashes from day-to-day life, but it is the story of a vampire and a werewolf falling in love and their life together. And it was just really, really, really endearing. So definitely recommend checking this one out if you would like to. So my honorable mentions, I have two. The first one is Sister Mine by Nalo Hopkinson. I really, really enjoyed this book. The only reason it's not like a favorite is that I don't know how much it will stick with me, you know, as time goes on. But I don't think that all books have to stick with you as time goes on. There's nothing wrong with a book being read just for enjoyment, but I don't know that I could really call them a favorite unless they're gonna, you know, stand the test of time. But highly recommend this book and all of her work. I love her as an author, and this was a really entertaining read about a set of twins who are half human, half celestial, and kind of their navigation of that whole situation. Very, very entertaining. Really enjoyed this one. The other honorable mention was My Dark Vanessa. It is, yeah, that's pretty much how I feel about this book. I still have yet to read Lolita. I really want to read them both and do like a comparison and a discussion about them. I haven't done that yet, but I do think that this is a really important book, and I think that she did an incredible job with the subject. Don't think that this is a book that everyone is going to want to or should read. There's obviously a lot of massive trigger warnings involved. It gives voice to a face of victimhood that not a lot of people understand or want to understand, but obviously, you know, surviving any experience like that leads to a lot of different coping mechanisms, all of which are completely valid, but not all of which are healthy. And I think that it's incredibly important that she discussed these things, but also this was a very difficult book to read and very it leaves your brain in a whole fog, which is why I can't even, you know, formulate sentences right now. But I am very, very glad that I read it, so, you know, I would be remiss if I didn't include it here in some capacity. Those are my favorite books of the year so far. If you'd like to discuss in the comments what your favorite books of the year have been, I would love to hear. And also, what books are you really excited to read for the rest of the year? I am on a total bender of reading like climate fiction right now, like sci-fi and speculative works about the climate. So I will definitely be doing a video on that soon, and I have been really enjoying it, even though it's kind of a downer to read about all the time, but it's so important and it's something I think about all the time anyway, so you know. But yeah, look for a video on that topic next month. It's April this month. Yeah, thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more. Thanks.